Hey, welcome back, everyone. Well, some big stuff going on today, which may not surprise many of you here, but folks, the Department of Energy is now saying that a lab leak is the most likely origin of COVID-19. And those of you who've been watching Crossroads for a couple years might remember that we've been saying this, I think, almost from the get-go. You might remember my documentary on this. Whatever, they're here with us now. Well, welcome to the club, Department of Energy. We'll go over some of the evidence with this, talk about what they have. Also, the FBI apparently made this assessment as well, and they just didn't tell us publicly. Well, they have now. So we'll go into some of this today. Lab leak origin theory of COVID-19. Well, it's no longer conspiracy, folks. Also, it turns out the Biden administration does look like they want to ban gas stoves. It started off as kind of a half joke. We didn't think they'd do it. Joe Biden, the White House, the Department of Energy now, they are moving forward with this, and they're going to move out bans on certain types of gas stoves that could wipe out roughly half of them on the market. Presumably, at least right now, this does not mean going into your home and tearing them out. This is more like restricting the marketplace on what they can or can't sell. Now, I'll go into why I think they're doing this. We'll talk about that for a bit. And of course, folks, there's some stuff I cannot talk about on YouTube, such as Tucker Carlson getting unreleased footage over 40,000 hours from January 6th. That was provided to him by Speaker McCarthy, House Speaker McCarthy. We'll be talking about that later in the show. I cannot talk about that on YouTube without getting a strike, and so we'll go into that after we jump over to Epic TV exclusively. And frankly, we'll see if they find anything that wasn't in my documentary on that as well, because of course, we had through some contacts access to a lot of that unreleased footage also, which tells a very different story from what the public's being told. All right, that said, folks, jump into the first stories for the day. Just a brief reminder again, we will jump over exclusively to Epoch TV after 25, 30 minutes or so be sure to join us there. All right, folks, that says, let's jump into the first story. A U.S. agency, the Department of Energy, is now saying that a lab leak is the most likely origin of COVID-19. And the timing on this is interesting because, as you may remember, folks, the World Health Organization, which the Biden administration is negotiating with as we speak, and the United Nations is going to be voting on as we speak within the next couple days, to possibly hand over our sovereignty when it comes to who can declare pandemics and how to manage them to the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization, on the side, is making deals with the Chinese Communist Party that they're not going to be looking into the origin of the virus. Now you have this. Let me show you this. This is actually New York Times, of all places, has it. It says, lab leak, most likely origin of COVID-19 pandemic, Energy Department now says. You don't say. Sorry, Wall Street Journal, I apologize. It says this, folks. The U.S. Energy Department has conclusion, not just assessed, concluded that the COVID pandemic most likely arose from a laboratory leak, according to a classified intelligence report recently provided to the White House and key members of Congress. Now, it's classified, and I'd wonder why they're keeping it classified and not releasing it to us, because that seems like it's pretty dang important to know. But regardless, it says the shift by the Energy Department, which previously was undecided on how the virus emerged, is noted in an update to a 2021 document by Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines' office. The new report highlights how different parts of the intelligence community arrived at disparate judgments about the pandemic's origin. In other words, different members of the intelligence departments arrived at different conclusions. Based on all these assessments, they believe the lab leak origin is the most likely one. Ironically, if we look at Fauci's emails and other officials at NIH and so on, it looked like they were assessing this early on as well. In fact, there's even some suggestions that they may have actually watched my documentary on the origin of the virus, where I gave pretty substantial evidence that it very likely came from a laboratory. It looked like they did watch it, but of course, rather than acknowledge it, they shut it down. And in fact, I think if you try to post my documentary on Facebook to this day, they'll probably give you a warning for doing it. It was bizarre, folks. Let me go into this a bit more, then I'll talk about the documentary we did. It says the Energy Department now joins the Federal Bureau of Investigations, that's the FBI, in saying the virus likely spread via a mishap at a Chinese laboratory. Four other agencies, along with the National Intelligence Panel, still judge that it was likely the result of a natural transmission, and two are undecided. The Energy Department's conclusion is the result of new intelligence and is significant because the agency has considerable scientific expertise and oversees a network of U.S. national laboratories. Hence, they would probably know about this stuff, right? Some of which conduct advanced biological research. The Energy Department made its judgment with low confidence, according to people who have read the classified report, but regardless, they did come to this conclusion. And the FBI, it says, previously came to the conclusion that the pandemic was likely the result of a lab leak in 2021 with moderate confidence, and still holds this view. Why can we not talk about this more frequently, or why is this not publicly assessed in the media for the most part? Well, you tell me, right? It says further in, U.S. officials declined to give details on the fresh intelligence and analysis that led the Energy Department to change its position. They added that while the Energy Department and the FBI each say an unintended lab leak is most likely, they arrived at those conclusions for different reasons. Now, again, this is a classified document. We're not able to see what it actually says. We're taking Wall Street Journal's word for this, but hey, sounds credible. I feel like I've heard this before, right? Now, folks, that being said, I'm being slightly tongue-in-cheek, because those of you who remember a couple years ago, over 2 years ago, it was either late 2019 or early 2020, I made a documentary called "Investigating the Origin of the Chinese coronavirus." The Wuhan coronavirus. At the time, it was not even yet called COVID-19, so we didn't have the official name for it yet. And in that, of course, that was at a time when the origin, a lot of people were saying, was people suspected maybe a lab leak. The most common public assessment was that it came from the Hunan wet market. It was the seafood market where they had live animals and stuff, you might remember. The CCP was saying that, I noted in the documentary, that basically the evidence did not suggest that it actually came from that marketplace. It looked like it was fake information. Sure enough, the CCP went in, basically destroyed the crime scene, so to speak, and of course then made it so nobody else could look into the origin of it. If you were to take that documentary, which actually is still on YouTube, they never deleted it, and you were to put it on Facebook, I think they would still fact check you. As I noted previously, the initial Facebook fact check, which we had like 150 million views on that thing across all channels. The original Facebook fact check said that, said it was fake and so on. The assessment was based, it was actually from somebody, it was a woman who actually worked at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It was an actual scientist at that laboratory. And the assessment that the video was fake was based on this woman who worked at that laboratory, basically saying that the safety standards were high and there was no possibility of a virus leak, which is absolutely ridiculous because virus leaks happen all the time. They later had some Brazilian, scientist fact check it. But basically with all this, it was a bunch of nonsense, folks. There was no credible reason they had to debunk the article or try to fact check it. In fact, everything in that documentary has since been proven true. And if you watch it, actually, it's aged very well. Funny note, they even put an age restriction on people posting the video. It was literally just my face, but they said it was sexually suggestive or something like that. You be the judge. You be the judge on it. That was the documentary. Anyways, I doubt I'm going to get any credit for it. And even then, there were other people saying it. But it doesn't hurt to celebrate your victories, right? You can watch the documentary yourself. I think the evidence still stands in it. Be sure to check it out. That said, folks, the Department of Energy, while noting that COVID-19 very likely came from a Chinese laboratory, is actually warning about an even greater threat to public health. Now, you've heard about the virus. You've heard about the China virus, or the Wuhan virus, maybe we can call it once again. But there may be a deadly pathogen in your own homes, and that is, according to the Department of Energy, gas stoves. Let me show you. All right, I pulled it out. I think it was too ridiculous, but I'll go in further. I'll go into that later, actually. All right, let me show you it right here. This is it. Epic Times has a story. Biden administration proposes to block half, 50% of current gas range models. Folks, we thought they were joking. I personally didn't think they'd move on this. I thought it would be basically the beginning of a big discussion about natural gas and so on. They're already moving on it. And it says this: a new regulation proposed by the Department of Energy would block half, 50% of current gas stove models from the market, an analysis by the federal agency shows. And it says this: in a proposed regulation published at the beginning of February, Department of Energy set a maximum annual gas consumption of 1,204,000 British thermal units, that's BTU, also known as EL2 standard for all gas cooking tops. If the new regulation is finalized, only half of gas cooking tops will be able to meet the new standard. And it says that's half the products currently on the market will be blocked. I will emphasize as well that anytime new regulations are rolled out, they don't go 100% immediately. They'll start off and they'll trickle it in. It's going to be, I can almost guarantee, it's going to be this first, and then they're going to expand it to, the next stage of it, and then the next, and then the next, until finally they can try to push them out all together or make it too much of a liability for companies and so on to even try to sell them. This is typically how the regulatory state works, right? As soon as you open the door to new regulations, they'll push the bar and continue pushing the bar until they get what they want. And in this case, I believe that what they want is not to get rid of gas stoves. I believe what they want is to get rid of natural gas altogether. Which, if you read into the narratives when we discussed when this was first coming out as a public discussion, that was what they were suggesting, was they wanted to get rid of gas, natural gas in homes altogether. It says this: DOE, that's the Department of Energy, estimates that nearly half of the total gas cooking top markets currently achieves EL2 and therefore would not be impacted by the proposed standard if finalized. You notice they're focusing on saying it's mostly okay. They're not mentioning that, well, the other half would be banned, right? And that's the Department of Energy actually in an updated analysis they even published. And it says DOE issued the updated analysis mainly because it excluded certain types of gas cooking tops in the previous analysis that was published on February 1st. And it notes further in that only 4% of current gas cooking tops meet the EL2 standard, which was their previous analysis. And again, as I mentioned, with the regulatory state being the way it is, their initial one, folks, meant that 96% of gas cooking stove tops would be out. 96%. They redid it to be only 50%, and they tooted their horns and said, hey, 50% of them are still okay. I would wager that they'll probably try to change it eventually back to the original thing they released, because the original thing they released, in my opinion, typically shows what the real agenda is.